from the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight as the Broncos have narrowed down their head coaching search to 3 finalists. And Benjamin, we're going to break down those 3 finalists and where we sit today as the Broncos look at Dan Quinn, the defensive coordinator from the Cowboys, the Packers offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett, and finally the offensive coordinator of the LA Rams, Kevin O'Connell. Now, with Kevin O'Connell, with them winning this last weekend, they can't talk to him for the remainder of the week. The best shot they have is the following week, whether he's in the Super Bowl or not. But right now, they have opportunities. As we know, Nathaniel Hackett has been to Denver. He flew in and met with the Broncos brass. Dan Quinn is expected to, at some point this week, get in for a second interview. And the Broncos will hopefully, within the next several days, maybe narrow in on who's going to be the next head coach of the Broncos.
Yeah, I've been told that they do want to speak with Dan Quinn in person here before and have him into the facility before they make any decision. Now, they may also do Kevin O'Connell, but the front runners right now are Dan Quinn and Nathaniel Hackett. They are. They want to talk to both these guys. They're wrapping it up with Hackett, and as we're talking right now, and he'll be headed back to Green Bay, and Dan Quinn will be along later this week, assuming he doesn't take another job first.
So, I mean, these 3 finalists, I'd love to know from your perspective as a guy that's like so immersed in all of this. You know, we went with the group of 10 last week. We were talking about all of them, including Jonathan Gannon, who we thought maybe because he had a good interview had a decent shot at maybe being one of the guys. The Broncos opted, I think, based on maybe his resume, not to make him one of the finalists. And I kind of see that. I mean, he was one of those guys that they wanted to get a chance to talk to. Seems very impressive, but ultimately didn't make the final 3.
Yeah, I was told he had the best interview, actually, out of the 10. But this is a complete body of work thing. So it's not just the interview. It's your resume, it's your body of work, all this kind of stuff. And a resume will get you in the door and all that kind of stuff. But all things had to be weighted. And I think it was a tough sell for Gannon, who does have a prior working relationship with George Paton. I think it was a tough sell to the Broncos fan base to say, hey, look, here's another 1-year defensive coordinator with upside written all over him since you did Vance Joseph just 2 hires ago. So I think that was a tough call. I think the team didn't feel like they could sell that to the fan base and maybe not sell that to impending free agents or anyone else. So I think in the end they really liked Gannon, but he was the 4th option, so he's out. That leaves Kevin O'Connell, Nathaniel Hackett and Dan Quinn. Hackett and Quinn are guys we've talked about ad nauseum since Halloween. O'Connell is a guy who, I don't want to say he snuck on the radar, but was kind of a late add to this, and really I think is Darren Moogie is really responsible for that name being there and being where it is.
That's it. I was going to ask you about that next, but
since they were college teammates and
roommates,
and backed one another up.
It's a bit of a business that who you know. Yeah. Well, so let's talk for just a moment about Kevin O'Connell, because you're right. We have said Nathaniel Hackett and Dan Quinn were sort of the top 2 guys for a little while, not necessarily in that order, but we had talked about them as 2 of the top 2 guys. It was a bit of a surprise seeing Kevin O'Connell, not because of who he is or necessarily the team he comes from, because of course everybody wants a piece of that Sean McVay Rams offense right now. But at the same time, he doesn't have a lot of experience. He comes from being a former quarterback. He is a guy that has been on a couple of teams in like a quarterback's coach kind of role, but I mean, he hasn't been an OC, but only like a couple of years out there with LA. And I know that the biggest thing that I think a lot of Broncos fans talk about with Kevin O'Connell was the fact that Brandon Staley wanted him out there with the Chargers, and Sean McVay blocked that. So that's like the biggest thing, like, ooh, well, there you go. But again, I don't even know if that's really that much of a headline, because in the end, it's an OC position. It's considered a lateral, and head coaches don't have to allow it.
Right. The reason it was blocked, and it's the same reason that that Kyle Shanahan blocked Mike McDaniel to the Jets. You don't want to lose 2 coordinators at the same time. You want to at least keep continuity on one side of the ball while you're putting somebody else in. It was the same thing with the Rams. So that's what what kind of happened there. O'Connell doesn't call the plays in LA. Sean McVay does. O'Connell is responsible for the game script, the first 15. That's what he puts that together. He has called plays one time. It was in Washington, and they were the 31st ranked offense in the NFL. Most of his staff, most of the hirings, most of the people he's associated with are Mike Pettin and Jay Gruden guys. So if you want to know what kind of staff he would bring, those are probably the guys you need to be looking at. Who was on Mike Pettin's staff, who was on Jay Gruden's staff. Those are the kind of guys that he would be bringing. you know, I have some, I think people look at the Rams offense and like, I want that guy, not realizing that much like Bieniemy, he's not the guy, you know. He creates the script. And oh, by the way, the Rams are 17th in scoring on the script in the NFL, bottom half of the league. They're third as soon as they get off of it. So is that a byproduct of the script? Is that the script being used to figure out other things that they can exploit later? Those are questions I'd have to ask in an interview before I hired Kevin O'Connell, because there's a giant disparity there.
Let me get to Nathaniel Hackett. How much should the performance of the Green Bay offense matter at all in how the Broncos are considering him?
You don't want to take one game. I mean, it's the same thing with Dan Quinn or Kellen Moore in that game.
I'm on the same page.
You don't want to take one game. It's body of work. That said, the body of work with Nathaniel Hackett, also concerning. Outside of a 5-game, 6-game hot streak with Blake Bortles, he's had bottom half of the league. He's never had an offense that ranked in the top half of the league. Pat Shurmur's offense is ranked ahead of his.
But again, it's the same argument with Gannon, where you say it's not so much about the X's and O's and what he did specifically in those roles. It's the fact that he has that experience.
A little different. Gannon had 1 year.
And you want to know, okay, I know, but I'm saying, and you want to know how he's going to be as a leader and a CEO type. So I'm saying,
but I mean, just saying, like, if you're the guy who you're bringing him in to be the guy and bring in, you know, that kind of stuff, what has he done? And to be fair, there's a great piece by Nikki Jabala on the Washington Post that you should read. It's really, you know, about what he does and that kind of stuff. And I think he does well. He does not call the plays in Green Bay. It's LaFleur. It's not his offense there. And when he has run his offense, it has been largely not great. Now, some of that has been because they haven't had great quarterbacks. But, you know, if you're hanging your hat on if you're looking at the resume, what are you hanging your hat on? I always ask that first. Like, if you're looking at the resume, what am I hanging my hat on that got me intrigued? You know, and most people are going to say the Bortles run to the AFC Championship. Okay, that's a fair bullet point. But what happened after that? The very next year, they fell back to being the 31st ranked offense, and you know, Bortles got benched for Cody Kessler.
Well, how much of Aaron Rodgers back-to-back, and I assume he's going to win the MVP this year, how much of those back-to-back MVP seasons can we give him a piece of?
Do we give him any of it? I mean, it's LaFleur's offense. What are we giving? What specifically are we giving him credit? Those are the questions I would have to ask.
Sure.
I'm not saying that he doesn't deserve credit. I'm hypothetically asking. We need to ask those questions in the interviews, and I'm not privy to that process. So. Okay. You know, in the end, those are the questions I would have if I were sitting down. Like the same thing with Dan Quinn. I have game management questions with Dan Quinn.
For sure.
I think his resume is lights out. I think that I have game management questions. What did you learn from your first stop type questions? Because there are things about him too. So I don't want anybody to think I'm unfair or stumping for one guy.
I don't think you're being that. I think you're just asking the questions. Now let me ask the question on Dan Quinn. He is he's the hottest guy out there as far as the name that the Giants are having him in for a second interview. And they're even interviewing people that he is maybe even suggesting, because we're finding out that guys from the defensive staff there in Dallas are also getting checked out. So how does that affect the timeline, I guess, is what I'm looking at here. Because for the Broncos, if they do really like Dan Quinn, they may not be able to wait till the end of the week to get him.
Well, yeah, I think, you know, in case of the Giants, if they would have offered Dan Quinn and then requested to interview with, you know, that kind of thing, I don't think there would have been a situation where you do one or the other. So, I you know, as far as being prepared to make an offer, this has been interesting because I would have thought a first hire would have already occurred. We're getting about to be into the process a couple of weeks here, and we haven't seen a hire yet. You know, the Texans have been kind of gun shy, even though they've been close on the same two candidates for a while.
That is kind of interesting. You're right.
So, you know, it's really weird looking at this process and kind of like, you know, kind of just eyeballing this thing and saying, okay, why hasn't a hire been made? I couldn't answer that, but I can tell you that, you know, I think Dan wants the Denver job. I do believe that. I'm not saying he doesn't want other jobs as well, but I do believe he wants a Denver job. And so the Broncos are going to go through their process and do that. George Paton is a meticulous guy. He's going to be meticulous. We said that from the beginning. And so I'm not surprised that he's doing that.
Okay. All right. We'll have more on the next head coach for the Denver Broncos, hopefully by the next episode of Broncos Country Tonight. For Benjamin Allbright, I'm Ryan Edwards. Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight.